Let's see what this purple passage has to offer.
Ready when you are.
Druids, demagoguery, and a doll's dwelling, all in this 35th episode of I'll Explain Later, the Doctor Who podcast that's achieved very good punch-in audience appreciation figures. With your hosts John West
and Matt Needer. Tonight, the Fourth Doctor and Romana put a bit of stick about, while a happy camper reaches for his flies before being sucked dry. Neolithic nonsense or prehistoric perfection? We'll chip away at the Stones of Blood.
A young boy wrestles with demons and confronts his worst fears as Matt Smith turns up in his bedroom. A wooden performance from Karen Gillan in 2011's Night Terrors.
And a fractious audience and management in bits over whether to pull the plug on some violent and ugly viewing. So it must have felt a relief for Colin Baker and Nicola Bryant to film Knockabout Romp, Vengeance on Varos. Hello, John.
Hi!
We're back, episode 35.
Yeah, it's only been a month.
It has only been a month. Yeah, I wonder if it'll be obvious when episode 34 goes out that it was recorded many months before the Jodie Whittaker series started, and there's no opinions to be found in there whatsoever.
Well, I mean, Attlee was still Prime Minister, so...
But anyway, we're back behind the mic. We've got a good schedule. We're firmly committed to seeing this project through now.
Yeah, I mean, I think if we record every 6-8 months, we should have 2 shows a year.
Absolutely. Well, we're starting with a...
Stone Cold Classic.
We are starting with a Stone Cold Classic.
Stone Cold Classic.
And one of those sort of quasi-anniversary stories as well. So this story broadcast around the 15th anniversary of Doctor Who, and it is also the 100th serial of the original series. We are, of course, talking about The Stones of Blood, which is the 3rd entry into the epic quest for the Key to Time. We've managed to encounter the Key to Time stories in the correct order so far. So we've done the Reboss operation, we've done the Pirate Planet.
I think that was generally intended.
Was that yes, I was wondering that, whether it was another of Jim's little gifts for us that he's left...
Yeah, a logical placing of the Key to Time.
A logical placing of the Key to Time stories. And I'm sure we can all agree it's massively enhanced the viewing experience for all of us.
Never have those pieces of perspex seemed so important.
So, what happens in the Stones of Blood? Well, the Doctor and Romana are on the trail of the 3rd piece of the Key to Time, and it takes them to it's modern-day Cornwall, isn't it? A stone circle in Cornwall.
Let's say yes.
Where they encounter the eccentric Professor Amelia Rumford and her friend Vivian Fay, who are studying the standing stones, and their work is interrupted by some druids who are up to no good, looking to sacrifice the Doctor. And very soon, as you may well guess, it turns out that there is an alien presence among the stones. In episode 3, it is revealed that Vivian Fay is the bad guy behind it all. She's a wanted criminal.
What? Wait, what?
Sorry?
She was the criminal.
Your bit of business there was so convincing. I nearly thought I'd made a mistake. It's very hard to summarise.
Well,
these
to be
stories.
honest, I did only watch it this morning. So if we'd recorded this 24 hours ago, I could have pulled that off for real.
So basically, druids, stones, space station, creepy hammer horror goodness or otherwise. John, what did you think of the Stones of Blood?
I thought the bit where Ross marries Demelza. No, I thought this was so yeah. This is a terrific bit of fun.
Right.
And it reminded me, especially at the beginning, a lot of The Mask of Mandragora with the sort of, I mean, there's nothing I like better than, a few culty fellows in some robes chanting away. So, and equal ops these days, because there are even some female cultists.
That's been observed, actually. This is a very female-driven story in terms of the villain and a lot of the major characters.
Yeah, well, obviously we'll come to discuss the actors.
Consults notes rapidly.
No, I mean we'll come to discuss Susan Engel and Beatrix Lehman. But yeah, you're right. There's actually a lot for women to do, which is great, I think. That's really good. Yeah.
It's odd in Doctor Who
Yeah,
at this
no,
point. It's a refreshing novelty.
It's noticeable for that. I think we'll get onto the relative strengths of those characters, but the presence of women does give this a bit of an edge. It gives it something that's a bit different. It does stand out in the era. Overall, it's not really a departure from the sort of consensus around this story, and I think the period that it's got that kind of hammer horror feel.
This is very well liked as well, I think, isn't it?
I'm not dissing it on that basis. I'm just saying that, where for me, I think that, stylistically this completely comes together, and I'm being a creature of style over substance myself. I'm kind of dragged along by its pace and its feel.
Yeah.
I think, for example, that there is, without question, the best Raven or Crow work in the whole history of Doctor Who, for example.
I mean, those crows are incredible. I mean, I think it's in episode 1 or 2. There's an
and yes, that is a dig
long
against
shot.
Face the Raven.
Yeah.
But I mean, but just to be clear, I'm being serious.
Yeah, they're magnificently shot. And actually, I think the direction...
Well trained, aren't they?
Yeah. The direction on this in general, I think, is really good, actually. It's
it's a good work by Darryl Blake.
Darryl Blake, who apparently made the decision, which was unusual at the time, to shoot all the location stuff on video. So there isn't that kind of jarring leap when you get into studio. Yeah, I mean, for my money, I don't think I liked it quite as much as you did, perhaps. I think it gets off to a rollicking start. I'm not a huge fan of the Graham Williams era, and I find, his ambitions to do much more kind of space opera, sort of outer space fantasy style Doctor Who, arriving just at the time where inflation means that he really doesn't have the money to deliver on that. And then how the sort of quality control in terms of the tightness of the writing, Tom Baker's performance, all those kind of things, everything is sort of slipping out of control in the Graham Williams era. It all gets kind of slightly beyond his grasp. So the opening episodes, which feel quite similar to the sort of Hinchcliffe, gothic, occult, woody English village kind of thing,
very much so,
was a nice dose of atmospherics. I thought it's a lot more atmospheric than I think a lot of the stories that surround it.
It does kind of fall apart when they enter hyperspace, doesn't it?
Well, that's the thing, and that's for me the big disappointment is I don't think as a story it really has. It sets up, I think, a lot of interesting stuff, and then abandons it very quickly to tell what I think is quite a rote story aboard a spaceship, which is very similar to the sort of not terribly well realised spaceships we see in a lot of Graham Williams era stories.
And of course, an ancient relic that's hiding some sort of alien criminal. Is something they would never do these days on Doctor Who, for example. I mean, such a hoary old idea.
Yeah. But it's I think it lets itself down really oddly. I think it starts off doing something really promising, and something which you don't normally see in this era, and I think it starts doing it well. I think the characters are fun. I really like what they called Martha and Leonard, the druid couple, who sort of clearly swingers as well. Something.
De Vries.
Yes.
Oh, Nicholas McArdle. I was so sad that as De Vries, I was so sad that he got his so early on because he was so. He offers Tom Baker a glass of sherry. And knowing Tom Baker's drink, I was going to say habit. I don't mean as an alcoholic, but knowing his predilection for a tipple, one suspects that was real sherry.
Absolutely.
But it was just that.
Well,
nice
that scene
where
the Doctor turns up at his house and De Vries knows exactly who he is and he's showing him the paintings.
That's not really resolved, is it?
Well, no, none of it's resolved, and that's the problem.
In fact,
I
that
think
whole
it's
cult,
a great setup. The cult of the Kaliak, isn't it? Who turns out to be
Brannigan.
Vivian Fay, and all of the potential of the ancient stone relics and everything. It's all kind of washed away as soon as we go into hyperspace, and then there's just a lot of silly. I mean, I find the trial scenes to be kind of endlessly boring. And the Doctor pulls out a barrister's wig, and it's all very funny, la-di-da.
Yeah, that all feels.
That's the annoying thing. It stops being interesting to do what this era to then just start doing what this era normally does, and so I found it a bit of a letdown. And I think ultimately it's just a bit shapeless and there's sort of not much to it, but it's a shame because I think the atmospherics work really well.
The atmospheric shots of the crashing waves below. I mean, this was, I think, literally 3 years after Poldark started on British television. So you can imagine that Cornwall, much as it is today with the success of the recent Poldark series, very much in people's imaginations, and heathland and the waves, and that it's a romantic setting. It lends itself to that kind of gothic horror styling. I thought, actually, that if I really think about it, this is a very frustrating story.
Yeah.
I mean, it opens with that ghastly bit of business between Romana and the Doctor.
Oh, yeah.
Sort of like, I think we should use the blankety-blank microphone to tell us where to go. The Doctor says, goes away, and then says, oh, yeah, I think we should go and see where we go next. It's like that whole thing of her saying
not
something.
Funny in the slightest.
No,
it's just... I mean, those opening scenes... You know, they're just treading water. I mean, it's some outrageous padding.
Oh, it's ghastly. And it goes on for quite a while.
And that happens a lot in this era as well. And that's the particularly annoying thing, is that the padding all seems to be put up front.
But I can't
it's
work
like
out...
other eras, the padding occurs around episode 3 or something. Whereas here, they open.
I don't know so much about whether it was Mary Tam's decision to go, or whether she was kind of recast because it wasn't working. But the fact, and I don't mean to I'm not dissing either Tom Baker or John Leeson in saying this, but the fact that there was genuinely better comic timing and chemistry between the Doctor and the robot dog, than between him and Mary Tam. Like, actually, some of the stuff with K9 was a hoot.
Yeah, I really like K9 in this.
Yeah, like, you know, when he says, "You've always wanted to be a bloodhound." Negative. You've always wanted. Yes, you have. Negative. And he's really persisting with this. No, I haven't. Yeah. And then the bit as well when
he's still quite catty at this point, K9,
yeah,
isn't he?
Which is great.
Ironic for a dog, but
but like when they discuss it, when the professor is asking about, well, what exactly is hyperspace, and K9's explaining it, and then the Doctor explains it, and then the professor says, "I still don't understand it," and K9 says, "Well, I do." What's it like? And he's, "Shut up, K9."
Yeah,
but that stuff's really funny. But even though there's a few bits of flair, and the stuff with De Vries, I think, at the beginning is really good, and the missing paintings, which kind of feel creepy.
Yeah.
You know that they're going to come back and it's going to be something. But actually, as soon as you begin to interrogate it, I mean, I really was just taken away by the performances. I thought Beatrix Lehman in particular, as that forgetful and dotty,
she's
but
great.
Still quite sharp. It's a nice fine line that she's.
This is always sort of raised by Tom Baker in interviews as one of his favourite series to shoot, partly because he really hit it off with Beatrix Lehman, and he sort of really loved her performance and really loved hanging out with her.
The scenes where they're together are probably the strongest.
Yeah,
in the cottage and on
he's
the
got
cliff.
so much more chemistry with her than he does with Mary Tam.
Yes,
they're obviously having a ball together, and actually pitting.
And she died the next year as well.
Really?
Yeah.
That's sad. It's weird when you see, obviously, the impetus when you're casting a Doctor Who companion is to go for, certainly in the classic series, go for a woman who's younger than the Doctor. And sometimes that works really well. And at other times when you see that actually they had the kind of breadth to try something a bit different.
Well, we've said the same about Peter Davison as well, haven't we?
Yes, he plays so much better against older women, doesn't he, than against the people they put him with. But no, Beatrix Lehman's great fun in this, and you know, there's a lot of fun to be had the way they flesh out aspects of a character, like the fact that she needs a sausage sandwich at the point where they're like investigating all of her research notes or something.
Yeah,
it's like it's fun. There's a lot of detail that they've packed into her.
And also the arrogance that she has, but only about her academic prowess. So she's very nice in every other respect, but terribly catty about other academics, which I think is just a nice little detail. It's that little bit of shading at the edge which gives you the sense that it's real, even though it's not. But when you begin to, I mean, I can't disagree with you. The whole of the cult led by De Vries isn't actually explained.
There are a few more than just the two of them, aren't there, initially? Yeah. So where are the rest of them?
But why are they doing any of it?
Yes.
It doesn't seem to be actually connected to... Or maybe I missed it, but it doesn't really seem to be connected to what's going on with the... You know, why are they sacrificing the Doctor to appease the... It's not clear, any of it, why that's happening. But they're great mood music, and they look terrific in their robes.
Yeah. And the Vivian's costume when she dresses up as the Kaliak and she's wearing all the bird feathers and everything, that's really creepy as well. I remember that.
Oh, that is great. Yeah,
I remember at my my primary school we had a copy of the Target novel of The Stones of Blood in our school library, and this was a point where I was just getting into Doctor Who, and it's basically at the front cover is a painting of Tom Baker's head and the Kaliak sort of bird outfit.
Yeah,
and I remember thinking, oh, that looks really creepy,
and it is.
Yeah. It's a great bit of design.
I mean, it is well. You've already mentioned Darryl Blake's direction. It is very good. I hadn't clocked that the location stuff wasn't on film, but now you mention it, the consistency of it didn't have that kind of jarring.
You don't have that sort of wallop. Now we're in the studio.
Yeah, I mean,
one week earlier.
That doesn't necessarily mean that it's in the very best of shape for modern viewers.
No,
but in terms of a consistent experience,
anything that sort of gets you over the line, I think, I take at this point.
No, I do agree.
What do you make of how he handles the Ogri?
Well, I don't know what they're thought of. What I quite like about the Ogri is that obviously they're these big stone monsters basically, and they're more or less monoliths that roll along.
Yeah.
So you would think that wouldn't work at all, and especially if they're made out of polystyrene and papier-mâché or whatever. But they've decided to put these lights in them, which kind of gives them... It's odd for a stone to flash. Yeah. That's kind of odd. Clearly, the execution is not quite right.
But they're not as bad as they should be, that. And I don't know if that's the direction or the design or the prop work or something, but they're not... There are bits, especially when they're sort of rolling around out of context on the space station. There are a few points where you go, oh yeah, actually that's quite weird. It's satisfyingly weird.
I thought the same. I liked the ambition of it just being an unmoving piece of stone that just gets closer to you.
It didn't shapeshift into a man in a gold suit or something.
No, and it wasn't someone. It wasn't someone with it wasn't a bloke with limbs dressed up with some rock-like stuff. They decided to go, no, these are monoliths.
Yeah.
And even though the execution was what it was for 1978 Doctor Who, I still think that it's a good idea, and it kind of that took me with it. To be honest, that's not any of the problems I have with it. To reiterate, I did like this largely as a function of style over substance, but as soon as you begin to interrogate it, the whole of the cult at the beginning doesn't make sense. I think that as well. I have to say, I really enjoyed Susan Engel's gloriously insincere performance. You kind of
she
get
reminds me of someone, because I was convinced when I slightly recognised the name, and I was convinced I'd probably seen her in something else.
Yeah.
And so I did a little bit of Wikipedia due diligence and concluded that actually I think I probably haven't seen her in anything else. But there's something, she feels like an archetype of the era. She's whatever the sort of the 80s kind of Joan Collins, power dressing, super bitch, kind of Rani style character, whatever that archetype was to the 80s, Susan Engels is sort of doing that for British TV drama in the 70s.
Yeah.
I can't immediately think of what the direct comparisons are, but it's a fun performance.
What I quite like about it is that she begins as a kind of stock, ancillary, helpful woman, which would be quite a kind of typical kind of woman's role for the era.
Yeah.
And then obviously emerges as the villain, and what have you. And I find her much more satisfying as Vivian.
Yeah.
With a hint of, and it's more than a hint. I mean, you can tell pretty much that she's the villain straight from the off, because she's so arch in the way that she's talking.
There's not too many contenders.
No. But I find the menace of her, and then when she has the mask, but as soon as the professor says, I'll take that, or the doctor says, take that mask off, we know who you are, it completely falls apart from a plot perspective.
Well, they don't give her anything to do later on either, because, I mean, she ends up just sitting on the sidelines.
Smirking at thin air.
Yeah, during that trial where, I mean, the Megara are quite annoying.
Yes.
Those kind of flashing lights with silly voices. And that, that whole stretch is sort of what created the whole thing for me, to be honest. I found it so tedious.
I see where they're coming from in the sense of...
But you sort of want, at the point where she's revealed to be this sort of major supervillain, the Cesare of Diplos or whatever she is, you kind of want her to go more kind of
and
bigger.
This is my plan to rule the world!
Exactly.
Well, you want her to have some
you want her to go
some
badass
dust.
supervillain.
Yeah.
But in the end, she sort of sits there.
She's basically just hiding out.
Yeah, in some sort of silver body paint, hiding out.
The judges, the Megara judge entity thing is locked up in the ship because, of course, it would be.
Yeah.
It doesn't really make any sense.
And it's not interesting either. It's I'll watch that in the way that a lot of the logic, as you say, is kind of glossed over in the early episodes. You sort of barrel along on the fun of it. I think there's precious little fun to be had in those final 2 episodes. They're very dull.
I kind of agree. It's just perhaps there's a couple of key performances. Perhaps it's Beatrix Lehman. Perhaps it's I think Tom Baker. It's a mixed performance from him. Some of the stuff with Mary Tam doesn't come off at all.
No,
the stuff with K9 and the Professor really does kind of work for me.
You sort of realise, I think he's getting to that point where he's only really good, Tom Baker, when he's engaged with something that interests him.
Yeah,
he's not at this point. I think he's not an actor who necessarily rises above the material, which is an odd thing to say about someone who's got sort of charisma in spades like Tom Baker. But I think if he's not interested by it, he doesn't really put in a shift. But obviously, and given how much he's talked about how much he enjoyed working with Beatrix Lehman on this, that's the stuff that he really wants to.
You realise what a high wire act his performance is at this point, because when the bits of business don't land, he's just irritating and over the top.
Annoying, yeah.
But then, on the other hand, when they do the extremely daft kind of bullfighter thing to tempt the Ogri off the cliff, and Dudley Simpson even does a kind of dun 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 dun. That's great.
Yeah.
I was totally. I mean, as silly as that is, I kind of went along with it because everyone just committed. But I think that where his performance is in that vein against someone who's maybe not, it's with Mary Tam, it doesn't work basically.
Yeah.
But yeah,
although if you're a foot fetishist, you really hit pay dirt in episode 1, don't you? There's a lot of shots of her feet wandering around. I mean, and a lot.
Yeah, and what I love as well is that when she, he's moaning about the inappropriateness of her footwear for the marshes or for the heath, and so she goes back into the TARDIS and changes into another pair of extremely vertiginous boots.
Yeah, and a long flowing dress.
Yes, which doesn't exactly seem like hiking wear either. No, listen, I mean, the fact that it takes a turn into being a satire and a pretty limp satire of how the law can be an ass when it is strictly enforced, which isn't really something they haven't really laid the breadcrumbs for that in episodes 1 and 2.
So, this is what this is about. I was wondering where this was going.
I mean, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
And considering we are going to be talking about another story, which at least is sort of quite on the nose about what it's about.
Yeah,
which is of course night terrorists. No, but yes, it's sort of that's a rabbit they pull out the hat. Where you go, oh, wait, what? Is this the point you're making?
I can't really explain why I like this other than I so enjoyed the way, the spirit of it and the gothic horror aspects of it. I can't disagree it kind of falls apart in episodes 3 and 4, but at least it was kind of, fun.
So we're halfway through the Key to Time season so far now. We've hit the halfway point. How do you feel it's shaping up so far? Sorry,
I mean,
couldn't even get to the end of that.
People must have been quite baffled if they hadn't seen the first 2 with all the stuff about the White Guardian and the Black Guardian at the very beginning. But frankly, other than a sort of bookending nod, it doesn't really feature It feels like there were some plots or ideas or threads or pitches lying around, and they've shoehorned a bit of Key to Time. I don't know if that's even how it works.
And it's a mechanic to sort of give the Doctor an entry and an exit point to the story as well, which is something that, again, when we come on to talk about Vengeance on Varos,
and indeed Night
Terrors, exactly. That's that's something that the series, I think, across the years has really struggled to sort of answer. Why here? So you feel like the Key to Time is a sort of decent enough reason as any. I mean, the quest narrative is as old as the hills.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with it. I don't think it's necessarily adding a great deal, and I know that people have criticised it on that basis, but I don't think it detracts from things either. And as you say, it neatly sets up a story. We're on this quest, we're doing this thing, boom. And at least they arrive with something to do rather than... Well, we'll come to that. One other thing that I had forgotten to mention. So we were discussing 1975 BBC television.
Yeah.
And something else, as well as Poldark, that came out in 1975 was the Play for Today, Nuts in May by Mike Leigh.
Mm.
And that includes, obviously, these campers on a holiday and their interactions with various other campers. This seems, again, to have had a bit of an influence because you've got the Blink and You'll Miss It camping scene with the two campers, a man and a woman, bit racy for Doctor Who, sharing a tent. He's topless. He comes out to pull his flies down, and I'm convinced... I don't think that in any other episode of Doctor Who a chap's got out of a tent to have a waz.
If there's another example of this we're missing, do write in.
Do write in.
I'm going to be walking around my whole yard going, ooh, let me feel you, tree.
Well, that's a really good thing to do. That's how you get to realize, and like you said, even every rock is alive. Every tree is alive. They all have consciousness. You can tune into a rock. It's an amazing thing to tune into a rock because they go back millions of years. And especially if you have issues, if you're dealing with something that happened in your life and you think it's so overwhelming, you go sit down with a rock. What do you think the rock's going to say?
I don't know.
Moving then to 2011, specifically the 3rd of September 2011. And
God, that was a long time ago.
Yeah, it's quite shocking to think that
8 and a bit years, isn't it?
I know it's quite something. Well, we'll come on to that. Oddly, I do feel that passage of time. I think it's still very common for people our age. I mean, I'm 35. Think of 2011 as kind of just a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
And actually, when you watch something from that era, you realise that there is a bit of a lag. And
A huge lag, yeah.
Night Terrors. Written by Mark Gatiss, directed by Richard Clarke, who also directed The Doctor's Wife. And this is about a boy called George, George.
If you will.
Who is very frightened of things in his bedroom and the sound of the lift outside the flat, and puts all of the things he's terrified of in one specific cupboard. And he's saying, please save me from the monsters. The Doctor somehow manages to get that message on his psychic paper and comes to see what it's all about. And of course, the monsters are real, or are they, etc. So that's the setup.
Yep.
I've got views on this.
Okay.
But Matt, I thought I'd hand over to you first. What did you think this was trying to do as an episode of Doctor Who?
I mean, we're in season 6 here, which is a series that really puts quite a strong delineation between its kind of arc stories and its other stories.
Yeah, and it puts a strong divide between those people who like it and us.
Yeah, for example. I mean, also, it's of the 10 stories in season 6. This is one of the 3 that entirely revolves around a father's love for his son. So I'm not entirely sure who was channeling what in 2011 on Doctor Who, but that seems to be a recurrent theme of this series that doesn't seem to go anywhere. I'll be honest.
Yeah, speaking of strong female roles, sorry, we were talking we were talking about the Stones of Blood having some strong female characters.
Yeah,
I mean, the main female character that you would imagine would be central to this would be the mother of the boy.
Yeah, she's entirely
disappears
absent
at the beginning and then only comes back at the end.
Yes,
to the extent that you wonder why they bothered casting a mother at all. But that's anyway.
Well, that's by the by. I'd not actually seen this until I watched it this morning.
Really?
Yeah, which is sort of odd for modern Doctor Who. You sort of feel there's probably some excuse for not having seen, I don't know, The Reign of Terror or something, or like sort of an old Troughton episode. But yeah, this was actually at a point in season 6. There's a few from around this time that I've still not seen. It's like I'd probably go out on a Saturday night, so I'd be watching Doctor Who on iPlayer. I wasn't really feeling the season up until that point. You don't bother to you think, I'll catch up on it during the week, and you don't. And then, as we said, like 8.5 years go by, and you're watching it to review on a podcast. So I was coming to this fresh. I've got no memory about it whatsoever. And I'll be honest, I'm sensing from your tone you didn't like this very much. I went on a bit of a journey with it in that I really liked the opening. I think that council estate, which they shot it on in Bristol, is shot magnificently. I mean, those opening shots of the building are incredible, and so it's a bit different from some of the other stuff they've got in this season.
that there's a few key shots, and it's a great shot, so I understand why they use it quite a few times.
Yes.
On where the council estate fills the entire screen,
and it's sort of completely symmetrical. It's,
yes,
it looks incredible,
and it feels at once inhuman. It's sort of redolent of the voyeurism of, say, Rear Window.
Yeah.
At the same time, of course, it mirrors the doll's house.
Yeah.
In the cupboard. It's kind of got that flat front. You could take that front off and see all the characters and all the tropes in their different rooms. So
yeah,
it's a clever bit of direction. I thought Richard Clarke had done
I think the whole thing is really well directed. It looks beautiful, as I think a lot of this era does. So I kind of went into it thinking, oh, this is a good deal, but more atmospheric than I thought. And then I was sort of very rapidly bored by it because it does the usual Mark Gatiss thing of just being the most basic possible version of what it could be. It's not my least favourite Gatiss script, I think, actually by a long shot. I think it dodges a lot of the sort of self-satisfied kind of, oh look, I'm writing Doctor Who, isn't this a gas kind of thing that he seems to have running through all of his other stories. It doesn't write the Doctor too irritatingly in this one, but it just does the most basic things. I mean, things that go bump in the night, creepy toys, a massive yawn on that. I mean, I don't think it's been done in Doctor Who for a while at least, but it's so Route One. And then doing the switcheroo into it being sort of the poltergeist / Shining kind of creepy kid sort of thing.
Well, right down to there being the two twins as an homage.
Yeah.
There's
absolutely no mystery to it whatsoever. I mean, very little happens in the first sort of half an hour. It's immediately obvious, I think, what's going on with Amy and Rory. So the attempts to kind of eke out that mystery, even to the point where the Doctor says, well, we're obviously in the doll's house, and it's like, yeah, I know, you don't have to come and point it out. We've been, there's
no, and it was very lazy. I felt, actually, having praised the location work for the housing estate, and I'll come back to why that was so important in a minute. But having praised that, the decision to basically just go to clearly an old house, to be the doll's house, fails utterly because it just doesn't feel like a doll's house.
No, and that actually comes across when there's the bits which are when they start noticing that things are wrong, like the painted on clock hands or something. You sort of feel like actually the whole house should feel wrong or something.
Yes,
but then maybe that would make it even more obvious. I don't know. Well, anyway, that's.
But I think it would oddly be creepier.
Yes, it would be
for them to realise they were in a doll's house and go, "Why the fuck are we in a doll's house?"
Because obviously the audience is way ahead of them at that point.
They might as well go full pelt into that.
Exactly. So then it sort of bored me because it was doing exactly what I expected it to do with a minimum of flair, although I would say that the direction is extremely good and it's very well realised. And then in the end, I thought, do you know what? I mean, it's the sort of... I mean, it's got an absolutely identical ending to The Empty Child a couple of years earlier. And like I say, it's that there are a lot of those fathers coming through for their boy stories in this season alone, let alone the fact that actually modern Doctor Who, since the Davis era and right up to the Chibnall era, seems to have this fascination with bad dads. It sort of is a kind of recurrent theme. But then when... I don't know. Maybe it's because I think...
But everyman actor Daniel Mays is surely not a... he's not actually a bad dad in this, is he?
No, he's not. And also, it kind of helps that he is a good actor as well. I mean, he's a very good actor, Daniel Mays. I have a slight prejudice in that every time I see him in an advert for something, I always just automatically think, oh, God, that looks depressing. Because he seems to be a magnet now for depressing drama.
The problem with the dad is, I suppose, that it's not clear whether he's meant to be a bad...
He's not a bad dad. That was a...
No,
but he's a dad who can't cope. He's a dad who can't quite do it.
But at the same time, he's considered giving up his boy. He's considered like putting him up for adoption or making him... Which, given the... Yeah, I mean, okay, it seems like he's suffering from nightmares and anxiety. I can't imagine a situation where a father in those circumstances would be So it doesn't really work. It's implausible that he would feel so bad that he would want to do that, and it's therefore implausible that there would be a volte-fast turnaround to "I love my boy."
Yeah,
it's all a bit strange.
and it's kind of all in the wrong order as well, because he only kind of realises that George is an alien sort of towards the end, but he's already had doubts. I don't know. I mean, yeah, you're right. The sort of the character arc of their interaction kind of makes absolutely no sense.
And it's also not clear that this is ever going to be communicated to the mother.
No.
Who apparently can't have kids.
No.
Which, there was no exploration of whether, like we did all this IVF and she can't have kids. It's just, I don't know. It felt a bit reductive for the male characters to put the blame on the woman who was out at work. I don't know.
Yes, I mean, it's that
it was a clumsy thing.
It's extraordinary that it's like they can't have kids rather than that, he's, he can't have kids or something.
Or whatever. But
yeah.
just that scene where you got two blokes talking about the fact that she can't have kids while she's out doing a night shift as a nurse. I don't know, there was something about that didn't quite sit right with me.
No. I mean, it is ultimately a story about adoption. It's about a childless couple who end up, or a couple who can't have a child, who end up adopting an alien. And
what are we meant to take from this?
Well, no, but
that adoptive parents might get very frustrated because there's a dislocation and end up wanting to send the child back. I don't think that's something you can handle as a kind of third wheel plot line in a Doctor Who story. You might want to go there, but I don't think that it should be one of a few moving parts within a not very thematically. See, I don't think that's what this is about at all.
No, it's about what they decide it's about at the end, and that's the annoying thing, because it's the sort of, to be honest, what sort of got it over the line, at least at the end for me, was I was quite moved by, especially the way Daniel Mays performs it. I was quite into the idea of the adoptive dad reaffirming the bonds of fatherhood irrespective of where his child comes from and that he is adoptive. It doesn't work because of the garbled route they've taken to get to that point. No. And that's a rabbit they pull out of the hat at the very last minute.
Is properly, like that scene where he pushes away the dolls and grabs George and says, "I'll always look after you." I mean,
it's a lot better.
My heart melted at that.
I know, and I think that's ultimately...
But that's his performance.
It is.
Because none of that is earned in the way that the story's been put together.
But, like I say, like I've always said, television is not a literary medium. It's like, you have to consider what is brought to the table as well by the performances and
But thank God it
direction.
is.
And
that's
disagree,
where it is. But thank God it is, because it certainly isn't there on the page.
So my conclusion about this is that I think it is either...
Yeah, because you've been going on about it now.
Yeah, I know. It's either slightly less than or more or less exactly the sum of its parts. Was my final conclusion. But I don't think it ever raised itself above that.
I'm happy
to
say
I think it's garbled.
I'm happy to say it's the sum of its parts if we can agree that those parts are few. But no, I thought this was really thematically all over the place.
Yeah.
We've already discussed the parental, the fact that the mother's sent away. The fact that the father, it doesn't quite land where he's meant to be. Obviously, he's meant to be stressed because he's not got a job at the moment. There's financial difficulties, but it doesn't seem plausible that he's either as good or as bad as he's simultaneously portrayed to be, which just doesn't. He's not very believable. It's thank God he's a good actor, Daniel Mays, because he does manage to sell that redemptive moment at the end, but it's not earned anywhere. The other problem I have with this is that one of the big themes is that there is no shame in calling for the doctor, or indeed directly asking for help or going to see a doctor to deal with
anxiety. There's a lot more than the usual "trust me, I'm a doctor" kind of stuff here.
Yes,
that's written through it.
But also for children to understand, I think I suspect that there was a big part of Gatiss wanting to say that children who may deal with anxiety, whether that is big league anxiety about trauma in their lives or the less consequential but still damaging or perhaps life-limiting anxiety of not being able to sleep in the dark, or problems that being frightened of a toy that you had. We've all been in that experience, and being able to talk about it and open up a space to talk about it and ask for help, all of which is extremely reasonable territory, and I think very fertile territory for Doctor Who A Kids show.
Absolutely.
The problem I have is that when they even though it turns out that it's basically a projection of his psychic power or whatever, the problem I have is that thematically this doesn't work because he's right to be afraid of the things that he's worried about. Yes,
I'm so glad you said that, because also all of the stuff that is creating anxiety is his environment, which is sort of seen. So it's the sound of the lift that keeps him awake at night. It's the horrible, threatening landlord who lives next door and comes around and is extremely unpleasant.
Yeah.
It's the creepy old lady wheezing up and down outside his bedroom window when he's trying to go to sleep, and she doesn't seem very nice. And the fact that sort of potted montage of all Amy and Rory and the Doctor knocking on doors sort of indicates it's not a community where there's a lot of love where he's living, and the building is so oppressive. It's almost like the point that the script is almost trying to say, which it doesn't, and I think I'm sort of in a way glad it doesn't, because I think that would be quite a problematic thing, considering there are a lot of children growing up in council houses or similar kind of situations across the UK. But almost the point of the story is just to say this is no fit place to raise a child.
Yeah.
And that's certainly what it's leaning towards. But it doesn't say that, nor does it resolve the issues with his environment. No,
exactly. And I just this in a way this kind of reminded me a bit of the latest series episode Kablam.
Yes.
Which clearly started life as a satire of low rights workers in distribution outlets and major online retailers of the likes of Amazon.
For example.
eBuyer.com. And then through a perverse piece of plotting at the end, ends up not being that at all. And indeed, the big corporation is actually, if not quite the good guy, then certainly comes out unblemished.
Yes.
And the people criticising it end up as the bad guys. Now, I mean, Elizabeth Sandifer's written about the fact, well, you can write a right-wing Doctor Who that says that the big corporation, which is trampling on each other's rights, on its workers' rights, it isn't actually, look, suck it up because that's the way the world is. You can write that, but it doesn't feel right for Doctor Who to be so hopeless.
No.
And in here, it's kind of saying, you can ask for help. You can, it's right for you to talk about your anxieties because, frankly, all your anxieties are real. Everything out there is bad.
Yeah.
And you can do that. You can do that. I just don't feel that's what Doctor Who should be doing.
No.
It felt oddly hopeless. I mean, one of the... And indeed, actually...
It does nothing to resolve the sources of his anxiety. You would feel like there would be... a thing where...
You'd need the landlord to have had a redemptive, I want to...
Yeah, and the Doctor rushes around enlisting everyone in a sort of community-building sort of exercise that makes it a happy, fruitful place for the child to be growing up.
I'm not saying that they all need to suddenly wear red rosettes and start shouting, vote Labour.
No.
I'm not saying it has to be left-wing in that sense either. Although, personally, that would work very well for me. But I'm not saying it has to do that. What I'm saying is that it would have to involve everyone just basically respecting the idea of being a bit nicer to each other.
Yes.
It doesn't do any of that.
No. Well, it doesn't do anything at all to address the sources of his anxiety.
No. So, in a way, the things that I do think are successful about this episode, which Gatiss has put into this and have been filmed very well. So, the slice of life intro stuff.
Yeah.
Felt very Russell T Davies with people talking about the bins and all that sort of stuff. And when they're going door to door to try to find George, or the person who sent this message in the psychic paper, the kind of the cynical pettiness of what all the people on the floor and the wariness they have of people, it is a kind of little symbol of what personally it feels like a staging post on the way to the more divided Brexit Britain that we live in today. It does feel like, oh yeah, that was a good shout. You kind of got that right.
Yeah.
And the economic dislocation that's clear in the not able to have his job. She's not making enough money, even though she's working for them to be able to afford the rent, etc., etc. Former council house, but they have a landlord.
Yeah.
So as a former council, so there's clear, there's even if you really want it, there's a bit about how the housing stock has been reduced through Right to Buy, and now that what was a social asset is now a privatized one. So that's why I mean it's all very mixed, because at the same time it's got these kind of, but it doesn't feel like any
also
one of
very
these
little of
things
that's done on the page as well. And I do think this is something that I find interesting about the Moffat era of Doctor Who, which is where the deficiency, you do see other aspects of the production stepping up to paper over the deficiencies of the character writing. I feel this particularly, it really struck me in how they developed Clara in the first Capaldi series, which Clara having been sort of completely a rootless nobody for a year, I think simply the act of making her, which is almost never referred to in the script, but a young teacher who lives in a nicely refurbished council block, and she has like a bottle of red wine on the corner of her kitchen or something. It's like suddenly you got design and direction pulling together to do a lot of work that was not there on the page. And I kind of feel like that's what's going on here, because I think you're right. I think all of those aspects are there to be read into it, but they punch through so powerfully in this, I think, because of how well shot and cast and acted those aspects are. And I think again, it's another example of the same, because Gatiss is seemingly so uninterested in doing anything with that, and indeed he doesn't.
No,
I sort of think that's entirely accidental.
But no, it kind of there. It is there on the page. I think you're right that it's brought to the fore and succeeds.
It's accentuated.
But why is it brought up? In order to tell us that there's an alien cuckoo who's right to be afraid of those things, or right to feel that anxiety of modern life is bleeding into his personal anxiety.
And that you shouldn't raise a kid in a council flat.
Yeah, there's no... And I'm on the fence about this myself, but the whole thing of, well, we're going to kind of tell the kids, no, you're right to be scared of the things in your cupboard. I think it's kind of okay to do that, like in Blink, with statues, but to really bring that into your bedroom, maybe that is what Doctor Who should be doing. Maybe I'm being a bit of a wuss, but I just feel like you have to be bloody careful what you're doing and have a thematically extremely clear line from beginning to end before you go into that territory. And I just feel like it doesn't earn the right to make any kids frightened of the things in their bedroom, really. It's not good enough to earn that right, I think.
In a nutshell, there's a lot of live ammo that they are playing with in this episode that needs a writer of considerable clout and sensitivity, but this is written by Mark Gatiss.
Exactly. We were talking about the key to time being a way, as shoddy a MacGuffin as it might be, it is a way to give some reason for them all to being there. The kid being scared and that going through to the psychic paper in the TARDIS. I mean, it's even mentioned by the characters as being, is that really
limp? Yeah.
But the one thing that I did enjoy in this episode was the bit where they're watching the television and the voiceover says, now, if you're watching BBC One on Saturday night, you would have seen Rolf Harris and Kate Humble. Now that, Matt, that's scary.
It is scary, and parents feel helpless. Their kids crying and screaming, even getting out of bed in the night. And parents can't do anything to comfort them. It's more than just a nightmare. Children are getting stuck in night terrors, and experts think technology might be making it worse. Denver 7's Teresa Marchette is here with advice for sleepless parents. Okay,
John, so what are we looking at for our third and final story tonight?
Well, this is a bit of a treat. The Sixth Doctor.
Our favourite.
Yes, I think fair to say. So,
and Perry? Please let Perry be.
Oh, and Perry, don't you worry. So, this is the 19th to the 26th of January 1985. 2 parts, obviously 45 minutes each.
Yep.
Vengeance on Varos.
Mm-hmm. Punchy title.
Yes, in which the intergalactic capitalist Syl is trying to get this extremely important mineral at a lowball price.
Yes. Zeiton 7. Yeah.
From the planet Varos, which is seen over by Martin Jarvis.
Actor Martin Jarvis.
Voiceover expert Martin Jarvis.
Face of the talking book, Martin Jarvis.
Absolutely. So, and he's the governor of planet Varos, which has, I'm going to call it already, a really interesting and quite well-realised society. Built, is basically bread and circuses. It's quite a poor planet, but they try to get by on basically gladiatorial competition televised.
Yes.
Where they kill dissenters. Fans of 1987 Arnold Schwarzenegger flick The Running Man will note some parallels. So, yeah, there's quite... And the Doctor, obviously, as is required, he needs some of this very specific mineral that comes from Varos.
That's the MacGuffin we got here.
Yes. And so that's how he and Perry arrive on the scene, and they fall into this negotiation between Syl and the governor, and Syl has paid lots of bribes to various people on Varos, so it's all getting quite complicated. I think of the Sixth Doctor's stories, Matt, this one is quite highly regarded. And I realise that's a caveat of the Sixth Doctor's stories, but of that run, and certainly for that first season,
it is. It's one of the ones that sort of stands out as, you know, people do like this.
Do you?
I feel like I'm going to have to duck slightly because you'll probably chuck something across the room, but actually I do. I think this is really good. It comes with the usual health warnings regarding some aspects of the production. Given that I put it on this morning with absolutely no enthusiasm and expected to hate it, I was first initially surprised by the fact that I didn't hate it, and then quite taken with the fact that I actually thought it was good. There's we'll drill down into that. You know, I've got this hunch from the look on your face that you're going to rabidly disagree, but this might make for something interesting. I don't know. But briefly, I think one of my major issues with 80s Doctor Who is that it's so rabidly apolitical. It's so determined to keep swimming in its own sort of pool and tell stories about what would happen if the Cybermen did X, Y, and Z. Wouldn't that be interesting?
And in an era of quite divisive politics as well, like it should be on the screen.
I mean, that's the annoying thing, is that, you know, it's only really in the Cartmel era that you get a slightly ham-fisted attempt at considering that this is the era of Reagan and Thatcher, you know,
and even that's very sixth form,
mutually assured destruction. You know, it's an interesting time to be doing political Doctor Who. I'm just sort of reminded of that. I mean, this is one of the rare stories that I think bothers to take a look outside and sort of take the temperature of a few things that are going on in culture. And I also think that Philip Martin is a very skilled writer who I think has a good grasp of world building and storytelling.
Well, Hetty Wainthropp fans will agree.
Oh, did he write that?
Several episodes of, apparently.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I never. So yeah, and to be honest, I think it's I think it's really interesting. I feel like I've got a lot to say about this. I think it brought out all sorts of interesting stuff, and I think, like the very best of the sort of Doctor Who stories, I mean, obviously in the mid-80s, it's a blatant commentary on extreme video entertainment and the video nasty scare, moral panic that was going on at the time. When it was sort of reviewed in the 90s and lots of people quite liked it, they picked up on how prescient it was about aspects of reality television. I think now, watching it in 2019, it's the most Brexit of Brexit Doctor Who stories that we've ever seen. I found it absolutely fascinating to watch this in 2019, and I'm sure that's something we'll come on to. I mean, compared to absolute tripe like Attack of the Cybermen and the Twin Dilemma, it's so much better than those, and I thought it was good. I'm going to say I thought this was good. John.
Yeah, I completely agree with you.
Oh wow!
I think this is fabulous.
It's really good
and very interesting.
Yeah.
I don't, however, think it is. I don't, however, think it's appropriate television for a kids show.
Well, that's the side issue.
And basically, I loved this.
Yeah.
But with the enormous and rather defeating caveat that I don't think it really works as Doctor Who.
Doctor Who shouldn't be doing this kind of thing.
And also, Colin Baker's performance doesn't help.
It's the limiting fact that's the health warning, and I think we should be careful not to rehash all of those.
No, and I don't want to have an argument about that.
Too much, too loud, wrong costume.
Yes,
wrong
exactly.
guy.
I mean, to the extent that Philip Martin I don't know whether Saywood slipped that in, or whether that as script editor, or whether that's Philip Martin. But even to the extent that the couple watching the television, one of them says, "Oh, I liked him in the daft jacket." Or whatever,
funny clothes.
Yeah. But no, I completely agree. I do want to make clear just how significant I think that caveat is.
Yes.
I don't think you have to be a Mary Whitehouse-esque prude to think that anything that's billing itself as family viewing should not have nooses put around people's necks, or that the doctor should not be pushing soldiers into an acid bath.
Well, that's the thing.
I really can't stress that enough.
I agree.
Now,
and
I as an adult watching this, I don't like the fact that the doctor is made to be involved in those situations and do those things. I don't like either, and again, this is just a sign of how much John Nathan Turner as producer and Eric Sayward as script editor do not understand the value or the values of the cultural institution that they are in charge of in Doctor Who at this point. That at the very, very end, when everything's basically tickety-boo, the governor asks the doctor, is there anything that he can do for him? And the doctor says what he wanted at the beginning. He wants his fuel.
Yeah.
It is left to the governor at the end in a televised address to say, and I'm going to stop doing any... or for them to, for the characters to say the governor has cancelled executions, isn't going to let us be free. The doctor doesn't seem to care about any of these things. He just wants to get to the end of it.
Fill up the tank and get out.
Yeah. Now, again, a bit like with Night Terrors, you can write Doctor Who like that, I suppose.
Yeah.
But why would you want to? The Doctor is a moral force, or she is nothing.
Mm-mm.
There is no point to this show if the Doctor is not a moral force. That said, I want to be very clear that I do think that this is very, very good drama.
Yeah.
It's a very, very... It's a much, much better exploration of various political themes than, for my money, say, something like The Happiness Patrol.
Yes.
Which I felt is agitprop ghastliness.
Mm.
This actually builds a world. And
is interested in teasing out and exploring the sort of problems and contradictions of that world.
Yes, and your comment about Brexit, I felt, was very prescient, especially in the character of the governor.
Yes.
The governor...
We should also slightly caveat, we are recording this podcast in February. It should go out in April. We will be very careful not to be too specific, given that there are a lot of unknowns that are going to happen in the British political climate between now
if
and
any of our
this
overseas,
reaching your ears.
But if any of our overseas listeners do want to send us tinned goods...
Yes, or some water.
That'd be great.
Please do.
The usual address.
Yeah.
The fact that the governor is in a position of... the governor is basically a weak leader in a weak position, pursuing a course of action he knows is wrong. But
it takes us back to what we said about the mutants as well, wasn't it?
Yeah.
When we looked at that last year, which was exactly the same.
But the crossover to Theresa May is, it's astonishing.
Well,
the only thing
but
being...
even to hear the phrase, I mean, and it's used several times in the script for this, the will of the people, which is an incredibly potent phrase in 2019. I mean...
Well, and the fact that, yes, as you quite rightly say, direct democracy seems to make all of the decisions, and it's done in a very demagogic way. I mean, the people do not come out well
Martin
Jarvis
says we can't keep ruling by referendum like this. He says at one point. It's
pretty much on the nose.
Absolutely nuts. Well, no, I mean, this is the problem. What's happened on Varos, it's the problems of those kind of dabblings in direct democracy while still trying to preserve a functioning government, and obviously that entirely collapses. Direct democracy is then presented as spectacle to the people who do it just because. So Arik and Etta, who are, I think, great characters, these two characters who basically never leave their living room for the entirety
They're not part of the plot.
They're not part of the plot. They're offering a kind of Greek chorus.
I usually hate that kind of meta shit, but this is
it
really
works
good.
really well.
Brilliant,
here, I think. And they vote or don't vote on the basis of whether they want to stick it to the characters involved or not. There's no real sense that when basically they have to ratify Martin Jarvis's negotiations over the price of Zyton 7.
A trade deal.
Yes, and he puts his trade deal to the vote and it gets crushed appallingly and he has to go back and renegotiate.
But what I really love as well is that every time the governor makes a proposal and it's defeated in this instant referendum, he is attacked by this energy beam, and after a few goes, then basically every governor is killed by this eventually. Yes. And that's a really, the fact that government by referendum means that representative democracy cannot function. It kills the power of the representatives, of the people who've got to carry it out. I mean, it literally, in this case, it would kill him. It weakens him. Every time there's one of these public votes, it weakens him. And that feels like a very good... I don't know why Philip Martin wanted to do a particular deep dive on the failings of direct versus representative democracy in 1985.
I'm glad he did, though.
But it's very good, isn't it?
It's really good.
And it feels pretty alive to the questions of today.
And I think it's helped along by the fact that I think that core cast, certainly on the sort of the villain side, is extremely good. I mean, like, Martin Jarvis is a proper actor doing a proper turn in this, and he's really good. You've also got Forbes Collins. AKA, I'm glad you remembered that. King, a very similar turn, in fact, as King John in Maid Marian and Her Merry Men.
Yes.
Who is just absolutely born to play that kind of role. Giant, meaty bald head, and here rocking an absolutely astonishing tash.
Badass moustache.
But he's got that real kind of
corrupt,
slimy, stinking,
kind of,
sweaty kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then
because he's in on Sill's payroll, isn't he?
Yes, he is. And then Sill himself, who is fantastic. I mean, I think really well
just grubby
realised.
Thatcherism made flesh, basically.
Yeah, but that sort of corporatist kind of. I remember because watching him, you think of sort of slimy, horrible types like Philip Green. You know, these people who seem to have their claws in at the top level of government.
Other flawed, immoral tycoons are available.
Yes, exactly. No, he won't sue now, not after what's happened recently.
No.
But, you know, these people who wield a lot of these sort of corporatists who wield a lot of power at the top of government. But he's like one of those sort of old school political cartoons, you know, from the 19th century.
Yeah.
Of what you expect these kind of grubby types to be. And, you know, Nabil Shaban is absolutely fantastic.
But if you think about he is. But I mean, if
swings
you think
for the fences, chews the scenery, and is just wonderful.
And I love the prosthetics.
Yes.
I know that they're not 100% believable, but you just go with it.
But they're great, and that scene, he's really funny as well. So that scene at the end where he's preparing to assume the governorship of Varos, and they're
spraying him down.
They're spraying him down, and he's looking at himself in the mirror. It's really funny.
And also that the whole thing of a kind of big international resources, multi-planetary resource company dicking over a country that should by rights be rich.
Yeah.
But by virtue of...
Well, it's the DRC, isn't it?
Yeah.
Essentially. I mean, that's exactly what...
Or even Nigeria, where there might be some local people who are rich, but it's not feeding down. I mean, people talk about the resource curse. We've seen it in Venezuela as well, where successive governments, and particularly, it has to be said, the current Chavez Maduro regime, have either through
may not be current at time of listening.
That's true. Have either through corruption corruption and or the shape of the international market, and through repression, managed to completely stop the fruits of that wealth that's in the ground from getting to the people. That leaves Martin Jarvis's character, the governor, in an interesting position, because he believes that they should be able to charge more for it, and that feels like quite a morally correct stance for him to take. But while that is being contested by the international corporation, Sill's outfit, he needs to distract the population from their poverty, so he's happy to let people be killed in the punishment dome. So on the one hand, he's a morally very confusing or conflicted character. And he benefits hugely from that. And as you say, Jarvis has the acting chops to pull off the kind of pained, what he feels is the kind of pained necessity of some of his, where he chooses to draw a line in the sand and where he doesn't.
Yes, and
there's a kind of sense that the ends will justify the means in his case. So he'll draw a line on we need to draw a line on the resources being sold at the correct price. If that means I have to torture some people on the way, or let them be executed, or even develop the execution as an entertainment package that could be sold to other planets, then that's what I'm prepared to do. And he's obviously not right.
No.
But the fact that he's weighing up those things and is right on some things and wrong on others makes him a lot more interesting a character than many others in this run of Doctor Who.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, no, I mean, he's a living, breathing character. So, yeah, I mean, you touch on the fact that these executions are being sold as entertainment, and I mean, this is, as a piece of Doctor Who going out in 1985, we are in the throes of the early stages of the sort of unregulated Wild West of home video and very violent films being easily purchasable and consumed in the home. What do you make of this story's kind of commentary on television violence? Because for a while, it's really interesting, because the reason why I'm asking that question is, for a while that was the prism through which this story was seen, and I think you and I have established that I think actually the politics of it are far more interesting than that aspect of it. But what do you make of what it's trying to say about violence on TV?
I almost think it's not really making any comment about violence on TV.
No.
Which I know seems like a strange thing, because violence on TV is a massive theme in this. But it's actually that everybody is being distracted by this orgy of violence. They're being distracted by it. And that kind of bread and circuses stuff, or the fact that there's not so much bread, so there's a lot more circuses, it's inviting you to question what you might be missing, because even to the extent that they're sort of, they say that televised agonies will sell in every civilized world. The moral force of that is not that people have been desensitized, it's that they've been desensitized to real violence.
Yes.
They are watching real violence. They're watching real people being tortured. They're watching real executions. And I don't think there's really any commentary. There's no suggestion in the script that, well, it all began with them watching westerns and then they progressed to watching video nasties, and then there's no sense of that.
Where does it end? Yeah.
Where does it end? It's simply that their bellies are empty and there's nothing else. So they've put, in that sense, it draws more of a parallel with the Roman world, but then throws it into the context of multimedia, the ability to distribute that content, more than it particularly talks about violence. And I would add as well that if it were making a comment about violence on television being desensitizing and immoral, then surely there would be less violence in the story.
Well, this is the thing that kind of led me off.
I just don't think it's about that, really.
No, and that I agree. I completely agree. And that's what sort of led me off down that path. Is initially I kind of thought that the show is trying. Because there is stuff in this that I think is unpleasant, and there are a few moments that I think do cross the line. Like, obviously, the Doctor pushing the fella into the acid bath is.
They kind of half-assedly suggest that...
They try to suggest, it's a struggle and he falls, but no. I mean, it's, the Doctor doesn't even try and help him out, or, the Doctor knows exactly what's going to happen and he just walks away with a slightly...
With a line!
Oh, yeah, he gets a joke.
Forgive me if I don't join you.
He gets a joke.
Proper sort of James Bond style.
And then there's also the bit which I think really crosses the line, is where the guard slaps Perry round the face.
Oh, totally.
Hard, and that's very unpleasant.
I wrote that down as well.
And... That for me, because I made the note saying I think the story.
Seriously, the guard slapping Perry, bit much for a kid.
Yeah,
and it's
I thought initially that the story was trying to have its cake and eat it too much. I think it's like, if your story is going to be about the desensitizing nature of violence, you've got to be very careful that all of the violence that occurs outside of the frame of what's being pumped into people's homes. It's like you can't just then throw in a bit for the titillation of us as well. I don't think the script's really doing that. But then I sort of agree that I think it rides the it rides the zeitgeist of the debate about the video nasty boom, but it's not about that.
It's not about that at all.
They give Syl some good. I like right at the beginning where he says, "These videos you sell, are they really, really violent?" Sort of like salivating over the prospect of watching one, and you can imagine that conversation being had in video rental places of someone going into sort of a dodgy corner VHS rental place and saying, "Get me the most violent film you've got," because of the novelty of being able to do that. But no, I don't think this is what it's about.
I would also go as far as to say that, unlike in, say, Attack of the Cybermen, where the violence just sort of feels unearned, it's just grim violence. Here, at least, there's the violence, obviously, that's being televised to people, but then there's also the violence, as you said, that's taking place in the plot. I don't think at any point the violence in the plot is romanticized or made to look great. It's actually all extremely grim, but it's grim in a, oh God, there but for the grace of God. I'm glad that's not me. I'm glad I'm not in that situation. I'm not going, oh yeah, the doctor's just socked him, or...
But it's that self-flagellating thing, isn't it? That, I mean, Saywood has always defended the amount of violence in these stories by saying that it was in his... It was his belief that if you're going to show violence, you should show it hurts. And I sort of think, yeah, to a point, mate, but this is Doctor Who.
That for me is, and when I said I can't stress enough the centrality of and the importance of that caveat. I think this is great television. I think it does, through an exploration of a world where lots of very interesting stuff is going on. It builds a society which at once tells you about developing world economics and how they're exploited by multinational corporations. Yeah. It discusses how violence and state actions can be used to take attention away from other more pressing domestic economic concerns. There's a critique of capitalism. There's a critique of direct democracy, demagoguery, the fact that the people can be persuaded to vote against their own interests quite easily if certain buttons are pushed. All of that is dealt with in an amazing way, and I don't want to dismiss it as a piece of art. I think this is a very, very good piece of television, and it's completely right that Doctor Who goes in that territory. But Doctor Who cannot be that violent.
Yeah.
It cannot be that grim. And the Doctor has to be a moral force.
Absolutely.
And the Doctor is not a moral force.
No.
So I enjoyed watching it, but I was not... But this isn't Doctor Who.
No. I just want to pick up actually on something that you said earlier as well about how the kind of meta bollocks in this is normally the kind of thing that would be very irritating.
It would boil my piss.
It would.
Normally.
And in fact, whenever Stephen Moffat does it and has its characters acknowledging their own artificiality, etc., it's intensely irritating. I think all of that commentary on this being television... is terrific in here. It's terrific
even
fun.
Audience appreciation figures and stuff like that.
We've got incredibly good punching audience appreciation figures.
Ironically, of course, at the time.
I mean, yes, maybe that's the joke. Those characters, Varrock and Etta, who just literally are there. They're not involved in the plot at all. They're just watching it on the screen. They are, I think, a really well observed just dissection of how people watch TV and the conversations that they have about, there's nothing on, it's a repeat, and then they're riveted to it anyway. And Arak especially kind of drifts in and out of being engaged by what is being shown. He's one of those people who says, oh, all telly's rubbish, but has it on all the time and watches everything.
A man to my own heart.
I mean, exactly, as I was just saying that. I would say the cliffhanger to episode 1 is a stunner. I think it's the way, I mean, obviously, just that idea of, we know that the Doctor's not going to have died of thirst miraging a desert, but the way you've just got Martin Jarvis saying, hold the shot, then cut it now, and then the music comes in. It's like,
that's brilliant.
It's a fantastic cliffhanger. But also the final scene of episode 2, where the television is just been cut off, the programs have stopped, and Arak and Etta are going, oh, we're free. Oh, what are we going to do now? I don't know.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that's
brilliant.
That question of what to do with freedom. I mean, because the thing is, there's a similar scene in the latest Christmas special. What's it called?
Resolution.
Where
toe curling Netflix scene.
Yeah, where the Wi-Fi fails everywhere, and so the family are left sort of saying, "What are we going to have to do? Maybe we'll have to have a conversation." You know,
Another writer also not understanding what Wi-Fi is
Yeah,
as well,
exactly.
which has happened a few times in Doctor Who. But anyway,
yeah. I mean, if anyone had an
separate matter.
Ethernet cable, they'd have been in business.
Yeah.
But
Did the Dalek take out the 4G network as well? Oh no,
Yeah,
okay,
exactly.
fine. Yeah.
Anyway, but the point is that whereas here, I did feel that like that. What are we going to do? It's a joke that's more interesting because they're actually at the dawn of an era of freedom.
Yes,
And they don't know what to do with it. And
No.
actually, it could all still go horribly wrong.
absolutely.
I mean, this is an era where, you know, this is 1985. Just 4 to 5 to 6 years later, you'd see the, you know, the revolutions across Eastern Europe, the dismantling of the Soviet Union, and in, you know, in many of those countries, certainly in what became the Russian Federation. You saw the sort of the Washington Consensus flying in and deregulation of everything.
Mm.
What then happened? Well, you had the rise of the oligarchs and the economy, instead of being held by a state bureaucracy and a state monopoly, was divided up amongst oligarchs.
Mm.
And so, you know, they don't know what to do with their freedom. Yes, okay, Varos has its resource wealth coming in, but does that society have the maturity to progress to a fairer distribution of it? Are there the civic institutions that would allow for that?
Presumably a large chunk of the population who miss the entertaining executions on TV every night.
And
as
who have
well.
been conditioned
that's
to
the-
think that way. I mean, Etta is profoundly loyal to the governor,
Mm.
even when it's not entirely clear that he's really acting in her interests. And even when he's distracting her, as it turns out, he's right about the fact that the resources are not being paid for at the correct amount. But you know, and that argument about, well, a full belly today will be against, you know, an empty belly tomorrow. He's right in that argument, but the subterfuge and the fact that he's willing to engage in such immorality by staging these executions as entertainment for people, her loyalty to him is evidently misplaced in terms of he's not being straight with them. Because if he was being straight with them, he'd be saying, this is completely immoral. I think it's immoral. I think it's wrong. Because he clearly does. And so there's that kind of weird respect for authority. Like, she would respect... That's
the thing. She'd respect anyone that was in that position.
Yes.
And that's the thing that I find so interesting, especially about her character, is that she's...
Well,
this-
she
it's this
is a
weird
Daily
mix.
Mail reader and he's a Sun reader,
Yeah.
basically. That's it.
It's that weird mix of a kind of political apathy to actually get involved in the detail of politics, combined with a sort of hang them all, they're just as bad as each other kind of view that by its own existence then ends up supporting the status quo.
Yes,
Because
exactly.
it's not even clear, I think, that... I mean, she is quite patriotic towards the governor, but then there's that bit, the only defence she can bring of him and his actions when her husband raises it is just saying, well, no one else would do any better, which is such a telling line. It's that kind of thing of, like, you can't even bring yourself to say, I think he's a fair man, he's a good man, he's a brave man, but it's like, I can't think of anyone else doing it better, therefore I'm happy to play my part as the patriotic citizen and tug the forelock, which is so interesting.
Yeah, it is. And well, I mean, it's you could read it as a comment on the working class conservatives of the era who returned Thatcher 3 times.
Absolutely. So it's quite a novel
So it
situation.
clearly didn't have much of an impact on the political, given that she was elected just 2 short years later.
Just one thing I want to touch on briefly. I mean, we've talked a lot about this, and I think, you know, we've concluded it's certainly a very interesting script. I'm also going to say, unusually for the era, I think it's pretty well made. I think the direction is good.
So tell me about Ron Jones.
Oh, I don't know anything about Ron Jones. Sorry, I think he did a couple of other Doctor Who's. I'm not sure. But I think it makes a virtue of entirely being studio bound. It's not lit up like a Christmas tree. There isn't things made out of white plastic everywhere.
So the director was Ron Jones. Also directed Time Flight.
Ah.
Arc of Infinity, Black Orchid, Frontios, and Mind Warp.
I mean,
and several...
It's not a killer run of...
he was also a production manager on Bergerac.
Oh, well, there you go. But I think the direction on this is really good. There's lots of sort of low-level panning shots. You know, I like those creepy shots of the cameras kind of lurking everywhere in the background. I think it makes a virtue of being all shot inside to look kind of really dirty and claustrophobic, and they do actually turn the lighting down, which they should do far more often in 80s Doctor Who. So, yeah, it wasn't even the fact that I thought this was an interesting script showing about the execution. I thought, actually, it is a watchable piece of television.
And always nice to see Owen Teale.
Who he?
He played Maldak.
Yeah, I kept hearing that as Malbec for some reason.
Malbec. I think we all know why you heard it as Malbec.
Yeah.
But yeah, Maldak played by Owen Teale, who's featured on. Oh, he's in that thing. He's in every. He's one of those.
He's one of them. Yeah. Him from that thing.
Yeah.
So, slight novel situation. We're thumbs upping a Sixth Doctor episode, but with the caveat that it shouldn't be.
Shouldn't have been made.
Done it. Shouldn't have been made.
Yeah. Basically, yeah.
Really can't catch a break this era, can it?
Not really.
And you dream of priceless spaceship. Who will save this Earth? Oh, pray, let the space fill. Oh, pray, let the space fill.
So it's just come up on the psychic paper that we have to sign off. So I guess we better do that because we always do what the psychic paper says, don't we, Matt?
As the pub has the Coach and Horses sent you a message on the psychic paper saying,
"Yeah,
come and have a pint."
They got some beer I like on in that they have some beer on.
Fair enough. Well, we will be signing off, but we would love to hear your thoughts on these stories.
Would
whether
we?
You agreed or disagreed. Yeah, go on. We'll at least entertain. I mean, we've watched Vengeance on Varos. We know how well direct democracy works out. It is the will of the people. So if you want to get in touch with us, you can email us hello@I'llExplainLater.com. You can tweet us @ExplainLaterPod. Or you can get in touch with us on Facebook, which is facebook.com/I'llExplainLater.
And there's always the fucking psychic paper.
And there is always the fucking psychic paper as well. So yeah, send us a distress message on that. But we'll be back next month with 3 more episodes of Doctor Who.
Woohoo!
Looking forward to it?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure, why not? I did, with our slightly longer than planned hiatus, I did re-plan and re-swizzle the spreadsheet roundabout a bit. And as long as we don't take any more breaks, we're going to be doing this through till 2023 now.
That's through the transition period, or the implementation period.
We'll have rejoined the EU by that point. We'll be back next month. See you soon.
Ciao.